Hello, everybody. Welcome to Meet the World. Ká-sióng, which means 假想, imagine in Taiwan, imagining a different world through Taiwanese literature. My name is Ta-Wei Chi, or Chi Ta-Wei, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator today. This event celebrates Ká-sióng, a new series of chapbooks from Strangers Press, edited by Jeremy Tiang. And you can see all the my all the chapbooks behind me, and they are so colorful and designed by very talented artists. And today we are going to have three wonderful translators with us, who are actually who make these chapbooks possible. But before I move on to introduce them, may I pay our gratitude to the following partners. First of all, I would like to thank the British Center for Literary Translation and the UEA Publishing Project and our supporters. I would like to thank our supporters that including the National Museum of Taiwan Literature, the Taipei Representative Office in the UK, and the Taiwan Ministry of Culture. These are the five chapbooks we are going to talk about today. Actually, uh, uh, we have three translators with us, and I'm going to introduce them briefly. And two of them already had their events in the UK. And if you you can check out their events and their books if you visit the Instagram account of Strangers Press. So today we have the other three.
Our first speaker is Jenna Tang, a Taiwanese writer, educator, and translator who translates between Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, French, and English. She received her MFA in creative writing from the New School. Her translations and essays are published in the Paris Review, Latin American Literature Today, Asian American Writers Workshop, Catapult, McSweeney's, and elsewhere. She recently published one of the most iconic Me Too movement titles from Taiwan, Li Yihan's Fang Siqi's First Love Paradise. Please welcome Jenna Tang.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Linking, a writer and translator from Taipei, Taiwan. Her writing has appeared in One Story, Boston Review, and Joyland, among others, and she has received the Pen Robert J. Dow Short Story Prize for Emerging Writers. Translations from Mandarin and Japanese into English include Yang Shuangzi's novel Taiwan Travelogue, which is nominated for the National Book Award in the historical graphic novel series The Boy from Clearwater by Yu Peiyun and Zhu Jianxing. Lin holds degrees from Princeton University and Columbia University. Let's give a warm welcome to Linking.
Cool.
Yeah, Linking, thank you for being with us. And now we are going to introduce Wen-Chi. I have to say that the Wen-Chi is very talented. He's a fine scholar. He currently he is at Oxford, and he got his PhD from sorry I from Switzerland, right?
Yeah, from Switzerland,
And
University of Zurich. Yes.
and I have to congratulate you that for your recent award for your translation of Chen Kehua's poetry, right? And it's called the Lucian Strike Asian Translation Prize. Congratulations!
Thank you.
And I'm happy that I survived the very dramatic opening, and now I encourage all of you to take time to fully introduce the books the chapbooks you have done, and your collaboration with Taiwanese writers, and then maybe you want to share some your maybe your methodologies, your values, your disciplines, and your maybe unusual eccentric habits with each other. And may we start with Jenna? Yeah, how about your book and your relation with the author Liu Ziyu?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for opening the floor that way. And so this story that I translated for the Strangers Press series, it's called 别人的孩子, Not Your Child, by Taiwanese feminist author Liu Ziyu. Liu Ziyu and I have been really good friends since the beginning. I expressed how much I love her short story collection. This is coming from the collection called 女神自助餐, which I translated as self-serve goddesses. And this story in particular is talking about the protagonist Yu Jie, who was working in the parliament office as as an assistant, but she was also going through certain crisis where her niece might be in danger in back home in her family. And so this whole story spirals around her working with the current event that happens in the parliament office when the MP was dealing with some social events which involves minor sexual assault or the suspicion of it. While she's in all this social discussions about this and trying to deal with the public reaction for the MP, she also had to navigate herself to go to the south of Taiwan to somehow save her niece from what could have happened to her. So this is it's a lot of psychological journey from the major character Yu Jie, who's trying to position herself like in her own ethical principles and to think about what has happened to herself before. It's a lot of reflection and about the Taiwanese society and the role of a woman. So that's pretty much what this story is about. I really like the language. There's a lot of colorful cursings in this chapbook in particular, which I really love. And I had a lot of fun working on editing this chapbook with our editor, Jeremy Tiang. Thank you so much for having us with you on this project. And yeah, it was so much fun. And we were trying to, the fun part of it is really to select like different curses or trying to recreate curses in English. Yeah, I'll share it to up to this point and I'll pass it on to Linking.
Oh yeah, thank you. And let me actually we can return to we can move on to Liu Ziyu later, but that's linking. May you share your thoughts of your chapbook?
Yeah, I like how you guys all call me by my full name. It's kind of fun. Hi, I'm Lynn. So I translated Sabrina Huang Liqing's I guess I think it's kind of a novella, really. It feels like it could manifest into a full novel. But in Mandarin it's called 搬运记, which we've translated as cloud labor with the fun UK OU in the labor, which I think reflects very nicely in the cloud OU. This is a dystopian, futuristic, speculative story, but I think it's really kind of a philosophical story in disguise. So it feels quite like a fable overall. The characters all have names that translate directly into words. So if you do end up getting the chapbook and reading the story, you'll see that the main character's name I've just translated as Sky, because in Mandarin it is just 天空. And so on. So his mother's name is Peacock. The other main character's name is Stone, which are just like 孔雀石头, so very direct translations. And the premise of this world is that we are living in this futuristic Taipei, which is not really named, and it's kind of for you to piece together in the first chapter, where kind of most things have been drowned out, the government has been abolished, and or rather than abolished, overturned to become this very authoritarian and rather this sort of ruleless, lawless version of itself. And our protagonist is someone who works as what I've translated as a proxy. What they do is they've developed this technology for people with very strong spirituality and sort of supernatural powers to enter rich people's minds, where they've created this physical manifestation of the Buddhist concept of a limbo, and they can remove things from this room, and that would translate to having removed certain emotions from that person. So that's the premise. And as you can imagine, a lot of ethical, moral questions come into play. And our other main character is a young woman who is living in poverty, and she does something that makes use of the proxy's powers, but is kind of acting in reverse because the privilege of having your negative emotions proxied away is reserved for the rich, and everyone else is, of course, trying to get rich. So that's all I'll say without spoiling what exactly that she does and what exactly happens. But it was such a roller coaster working on this because I was so invested in the story, and I could start envisioning like the Netflix adaptation, you know, as I was doing it. I was like, I want to see these people. This is so sexy. This is so incisive. And like the masses will love this. So I really hope that people pick up the book and follow the story because it's just completely absorbing. And it was such a treat working on this with Jeremy, who, as Jenna said, was our editor. And he himself is such a wonderful translator, of course, but also a writer and a playwright, which I feel like made him a dream to work with on this particular book because there's so much dialogue, and it's just like bam, 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 and then followed by like beautiful prose and descriptions of the setting. But the story does kind of carry along almost purely by dialogue, and I do feel like it can be, I just keep saying this, but it can be adapted into a beautiful theatrical version that I would binge watch. So this was such a fun project to work on, and yeah, I can't wait to get my copy of the chapbooks.
Good. Yeah, and thank you, Lin. And because I guess some readers might join the room later than others, so may I tell you that actually all the presenters here are from different countries. The previous two translators are actually in the States. They are in the early morning. They got up before there was sunshine, so it's very challenging for them. And our next presenter, next translator is Wen-Chi. Wen-Chi is in a normal time zone because he is in the UK. Yeah, thank you. The Facebook and the Chen Kehua's poem collection, and Wen-Chi, I think that may you talk about the chapbook first.
So this is the story. It's called Lian Shu in Chinese, and it was translated into not Facebook, rather social. It's kind of a literary translation strategy. And at the beginning, the story was just got a moment. They just got a literary prize in Taiwan, and Jeremy just asked us to translate this work. And this is quite interesting because the story is about indigenous people's life, and particularly like female woman's life. And I think it's quite interesting because usually as an expert, like doing Taiwan study or Taiwanese literature, usually we just see like indigenous life from outsiders. For example, like there are so many books, so many monographs in English world as well, that is all about indigenous life, but it's kind of an outsider's perspective. But in this short story, I feel quite interesting because the writer actually is also a woman, and she's talking about how the life really it is in the tribe. And the story is at the beginning, you just see directly a heroine just commit suicide falling from the window and third floor, I think. And it was really shocked in a way. And then somehow you have to slowly you have to read and you try to understand what's happening. And it's very interesting because the writers Lamulu Pakao, and she tried to intertwine, for example, like indigenous struggle in the indigenous people struggle and also female like gender issues together. And you see actually the heroine is also lesbian and how she just encountered so many problems in the tribe. And also you see how she want to go away from the tribe because she just feel like she have to want to develop her career in the city, for example. But she just feel like could not live up his family or live up his tribe. So she had to return to the tribe. But everybody don't understand that nobody understand her because she say like she's just doing like her project, like a local project in the indigenous tribe, but nobody understand her. So it's kind of a struggle, like if she want to leave or not. And also all the families doesn't understand her, not just because her lesbian relationship, but also lesbian sexuality, and also because her what she's doing like a very different from the local people. People don't understand what this kind of project they call kind of a cooperation with the government to develop the local culture, like indigenous culture. So you see kind of struggle as well. I think it's quite interesting for people like me, like I'm not the religious person, but you could have a chance to get a glimpse into the inside, what's really happening and the struggle of the indigenous people. I think it's really cool as well. Yeah, so highly recommended to read this work.
I have a question for Wen-Chi, but
Yes.
actually we can start from Jenna first. I want may you talk about your relation? How do you co-work with your assigned author? For instance, I know Liu Ziyu. Liu Ziyu is a very active feminist writer in Taiwan now, and I am a close friend to Sabrina Huang. Sabrina Huang is admired essayist, but also a great story writer. But I believe both of you can tell us more about the two writers. And when she is, and my my question for Wen-Chi might be kind of more complicated because Wen-Chi, you co-work not only with a writer not from your own culture, but you also co-work with another translator. So may you talk about your very different collaboration after the previous two translators? But again, let's start from Jenna. Yeah, Jenna, how do you co-work with your assigned writer Liu Ziyu? Does she leave you alone?
Yeah, she pretty much trusted me with the translation. There were some little parts where I consulted her, like, oh, what exactly are you trying to say here? Like, did I understand it right? It's mostly these kinds of questions. And there's one thing in particular that she asked me if it was possible, and I told her yes, totally. Is to spell her name in the Taiwanese Hokkien pinyin. Like she'd like to highlight the importance of another dialect from Taiwan, and therefore she asked if it was possible to spell her name in Taiwanese. And the pinyin that we're seeing on the cover right now is what she provided me with. So and she told me she'd like to go by this name instead of like an English name that a lot of us have. So that was pretty intentional, and throughout the story it's mostly me working with Jeremy Tiang, and with Liu Zhi, our relationship has been pretty friendly. Like we hung out in my town and we went out for just to explore different restaurants. And I initially approached her with the short story collection, Self-Serve Goddesses. And so there are several stories like contained in that collection that I've been working on for book form. So I've just been in touch with her, except I got a little busy like promoting my book here, but I am also spending some time working on her collection as my next potential book to be published. So our relationship has been really pretty much like very friendly with each other, and I see the process, like getting to know authors or getting to know the situations of the rights to be something like kind of enjoyable, like I can make friends and we're all hanging out together, and I like the idea of like forming a community with authors and their publishers.
Good, good. Thank you. And meanwhile, I also earlier I encouraged the translators to ask each other questions, but I also need to encourage the readers with us. If you have any question, please feel free to write in the chat box, and we will try to answer you. And I know that the interaction with the translators is always fun, so please don't be shy. And how about Lincoln? Lincoln, what do you yeah, I know that actually Huang Liqun is not Sabrina Huang is usually not known for science fiction, so I guess you might be surprised when you read the story.
Like you said, I think I don't know if I can say this, but I guess I think of her as most known for her essays, which are so incisive and, commenting on kind of the condition of living as a woman in Taiwan. And so it did surprise me, yeah, to get the story and then to see one that the main character that we started off with is male and living very far off in the future. And for any readers who are familiar with Taiwan, especially Taipei, it's really fun to kind of piece together the bits of like the remnants and the dregs of what she writes about in the story as map them onto the current existing Taipei. And it does feel we live in this where we're talking on November 7th, 2024, kind of near apocalyptic age where a lot of this feels far away, but that it's not unimaginable. And so I feel like this was a really interesting extension of her essays that comment so much on contemporary life, that this is kind of how she extends those thoughts into the future almost. I don't want to speak for her, but at least that's how I, as a reader, was reading this, that this is this great thinker of our contemporary times, kind of projecting what these future paths might lead us to should we let them. And that was terrifying, but also strangely, because of this storytelling and because of the characters and their interactions, was kind of, you could really luxuriate in the disastrous state that she describes as well, which is kind of scary because you then can see how people would be attracted to these certain ideas or certain offerings, in this case of like, oh, well, just take away your negative emotions. And you can see that how then spirals into this future where we have all these new problems. So I'm kind of rambling. As you said, it's very early, but I feel like knowing her as this great essayist on social issues, on how we perceive the world, made reading her futuristic story even more kind of I didn't like despairing, but also fascinating and yeah, probing.
Yeah. Thank you. And earlier, the Jenna and Lin talk about Liu Ziyu and Sabrina Wang Liqun. And if dear readers, if you read Chinese, you might you are certainly encouraged to check out the books by the Chinese language books by the two very highly talented female writers. And now let's move on to Wen-Chi's collaborators. Wen-Chi might need to explain more because we are less familiar with your assigned writer, and we are not very familiar with your work of called translation either. So may you
Mm.
share with your experience?
Well, okay, referring to the writer, actually, I really have no idea when I just got the
Really?
assignment. Like,
But
okay, we have to
oh,
translate. So
okay.
actually, I have no idea about the writer 蓝木柳八高阳. But it's quite interesting. I mean, when I just read and I just feel like, oh, it's really cool. And also, actually, she already got so many literary prize. But I don't remember she
Good.
already have like a collection or something, but she already got so many prize. And it's
Oh,
quite interesting to see like usually how those indigenous people they are being seen in a way. I mean in Taiwanese literary circle, it's just being seen through this kind of literary prize usually. So I was have chance to read. I was work with cooperate with Dong Shuming 老师. Maybe you know Dong Shuming.
yeah.
Dong Shuming. She's the professor. She's an expert, particularly in indigenous poetry. And then I just invite her to give a kind of contribute a chapter in just poetry. It's quite cool it's in a way because it's the same like the Facebook, right? The short story Facebook or like a social. It's just like kind of a perspective from the insider, like really what's really happening, the struggle of the indigenous people. And at the same time, she just this demonstrate so many indigenous poetry. And those indigenous poetry, actually, I have no idea as well. But those poetry usually just we know this poetry from literary prize. So this is a way how indigenous people being seen in Taiwanese reader circle through literary prize, actually, not through the kind of publishing works like you see kind of collections of those like monograph or something. So yes, so this is a way how the indigenous people will be seen in Taiwan. And about my co-translation with Colin Bramwell, it's really cool as well. We met each other in 2014 or 12, I think 2012 or 13, when I was in Edinburgh for my MA degrees. And then at the was just like advertised like, hey, I want to find someone who could just help me to translate some works from Taiwan. I just post this advertise on Facebook, like Literary Society at University of Edinburgh Facebook, something like this. And there were two people approach me. One is Colin, another is a girl who's from Singapore. But I noticed that I want someone actually who really understands, I mean, who's already in English context and also have no idea of Chinese, like Mandarin or Chinese language. I feel it's more interesting because, so this reason I just choose Colin rather than that girl who's from Singapore because I feel like kind of overlap because that girl, she's from in Singapore, so she must understand Chinese as well. So I just strategically choose Colin and then we start to cooperate each other cooperate for certain works. And usually my experience that I translate some certain works, particularly poetry, usually like poems from certain work, and then translate kind of first draft, and then Colin will just receive this first draft and just revise or like make it in a better, improve it or polish it into a better version. And then you see like so after Colin, you will see like first version, second version, because he was thinking like it's quite cool to have a second version as well. So there's a second version and third version, and usually like the third version will be more radical in a way, like totally different from the originality. Because I just give him the first draft, right? And the draft is usually quite bad in a way because just a little translation, and also the grammar was so bad, and also for English readers, sometimes they don't understand maybe. So I think that's quite cool to have collaboration, and because Colin, he have to understand, he have to know everything based on my draft rather than to understand the originality but he knows English quite well because he got a PhD master degree in English literature at the moment. Now she already got a PhD degree in translation. So it's really cool. Like she just use his knowledge, like all the knowledge from English literature, and try to improve or like polish a piece of work to make it better. And I think it really works well in certain ways because we got certain prize, and also our work already be compiled in certain anthologies. So this is our way of cooperation. And I think
Thank
it's really cool as well because I mean, this is not a single case. I actually, for example, Yamu's work in German translation, he also there's two translators. And also I remember I recently just received just encountered a academic book that is particularly on course translation. So actually course translation, there are so many people doing this kind of code translation because, and it's really cool in a way because two people say from different background or maybe from different education, and then they cooperate each other and also try to figure out the best way to present the best work, the best version of the work. I think it really works as well. And sometimes I encourage people, if you feel like local people, like you're Taiwanese, but you want to translate the work and you don't feel secure, maybe you could find a local people who just cooperate with you.
Thank you for your we learn a lot from your experience, and because all of us are busy and all of us are focused on our obligations, so may I do some give you some updates now. There are more than 30 people watching us, and we get a question. You certainly I guess maybe I don't know if you can read the question, but may I read the question from Paul to you, and it's kind of a provocative, so but you are free to take time to answer. That is, do the translators think that Taiwanese writers, with their freedom of expression compared to the censorship in China itself, are now writing or could write about the genocide in China or about the Muslims and the Uyghurs in China? Yeah, what do you think? I know that it's not an easy question. It's not easy to answer, and maybe you might want to prioritize other topics, but take your time and think what you maybe we can start from other questions first. Yeah, certainly it's a for our focus is primarily on the chapbooks, but after that, so if we have some energy left, we can move on to others. But do you want to talk about does anybody want to take the question, or do you want to talk more about you with the chapbooks and the writers, and or your relationship with the BCLT, which often generously gives a platform for Taiwanese writers and translators. And Jeremy Tiang, I think that many of you are familiar with Jeremy. Jeremy is a very kind mentor to many of us.
I can take the question quickly, actually, about the Paul Donegan, Mr. Paul Donegan's question about the censorship, and also can Taiwanese writers write about that. And surely, definitely, there are some, I think there must be some Taiwanese writers writing about that as well, what's happening in China. And there's there's no censorship. And what is really, we appreciate in a way, this of course, the caliber of freedom in China, freedom of speech in Taiwan. And what is really interesting is that you see certain writers, when they are forbidden or banned in China, they just publish their work in Taiwan. And for example, the famous one is Ká-sióng Jian's work, right? And Ká-sióng Jian's Linshan Soul Mountain, I remember at the beginning was just published in Taiwan. And there are certain works as well, he just published directly in Taiwan. And there's a professor called Zhang Minxun, and he particularly proposed the idea inspired by Casaloma, the World Republic Letters. Maybe you know this idea, the World Republic Letters, that Paris is the center of the world literature, because Paris, all the works must be published in Paris first. And in Sinophone study or Sinophone communities, I would like Zhang Minxun, he just say, actually Taiwan or Taipei is the kind of the World Republic of Chinese letters in a way. So all the works must be first been seen to the world, not through Taiwan in a way, like first published in Taiwan and then later to the world. So I would say yes, in Taiwan there's no censorship, and because China has everything is center, so Taiwan have to take advantage of that, and there are so many writers published already in Taiwan, and then through Taiwan to the world. For example, like Ká-sióng. So yeah, this is my perspective in a way.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you. I think that since we finally touch upon the relation between politics and the literature, I think maybe it's fair for Lin and Jenna to vent because you are in the United States. I I really feel for you because you are stressed out. I know yeah, and how about maybe Lin first and Jenna, and yeah, and uh, 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 just share us a little bit. Maybe yeah, you when you are working with your translations, you will also experiencing everything in the States. You want to want to share us some thoughts a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, going back to the question itself, kind of semantically, could Taiwanese writers write about these things? Like when she said, yes, they could, they can, because there is freedom of expression. The government is not interfering, as far as I know, interfering in what publishers choose to put out into the world. And in the US, as you just said, Ta-Wei, that we are maybe on the verge of seeing some of that change on a state-by-state basis in the US. So I think we might, I hope not, but I think we might reach this strange point where what's being published in Taiwan, and for those of us who are translating literature from Taiwan, to kind of have more like a higher degree of freedom of expression in the source material than can maybe be widely read in the destination of the English translation. And I say this because so when my translated book to come out this actually in 5 days, Taiwan Travelogue by Yang Shuangzi, is a queer historical novel. And because it has been nominated for the National Book Award, we are going to Miami Book Fair at the end of this month to promote it. However, I am a little scared because Florida famously has been banning a lot of books, especially queer books. And I'm kind of wondering, hope we're still, within this current administration, so I think I'll be okay. But I think that is something that has been thrown into the air, whereas we never kind of questioned, do you have free speech in the United States, right? So these are things that really can change, and I think Taiwan is just, for me, a really optimistic example of how quickly we can evolve into democracy. Even as we're seeing some parts of the world quickly devolve out of democracy. So just, some thoughts.
Thank you, and please take good care and be resilient. And certainly good luck in Florida. And Jenna, before you move on, I think that is because Jenna, Jenna is doing a book tour. Actually, not only one. Actually, Jenna has done dozens of book events on a book about psychological trauma. So maybe you also find that the collective psychological trauma in the States might have something in common with the psychological trauma you are dealing with in your translation. But before you speak, may I interrupt because one reader, Catherine Yu, shares with that she finds that there is already a wave of Hong Kong, maybe Hong Kong diasporic writing in Taiwan. So I think that it's a nice answer. I said it's a nice response to the to Paul earlier. Yes, readers and the publishers and the cultural agencies in Taiwan are certainly concerned with those who are suppressed in China, including those in Hong Kong and those in Uyghur among the Uyghurs. But because Hong Kong culture is much closer to Taiwan, so it's natural for Taiwanese editors, writers, translators, and so on to prioritize those in Hong Kong. Okay, but so Jenna, are you ready? Are you ready to share your maybe psychological adventures?
Yeah, first of all, just following up with Lynn's comments about Miami. I was just there doing my book tour. Even though my novel in translation isn't necessarily about queer, but it's about feminist work. So there's definitely some kind of censorship there. I would give you that. And I say it anyways. Because the organization and the university that invited us has certain responsibility to keep us safe. So that's how I went about it. But of course, it probably varied by who you're working with, and I would still be careful, but there's a part of me that's just like, I don't care. I just want to talk about it. Yeah, I've been on US book tour this is my 19 cities right now, and I'm really tired. But overall, promoting this book, and I guess something that I was thinking about while we talk about Hong Kong diaspora literature in Taiwan, that because of freedom of expression in Taiwan, there are so many different thematic bookstores that's popping up at least in Taipei City and many other cities. Like there's actually a list of secondhand bookstores on the independent, I think it's called like independent Taiwanese bookstores, something like that. That pretty much like very generally and broadly introduces bookstores, for example, from that collects books from Hong Kong, or bookstores that biography books and other kinds of books that are also very specific LGBTQIA plus bookstores or feminist bookstores that I think it's really worth like digging into. There's so many things, like something I really enjoyed doing while I was being in Taipei was to explore all these thematic bookstores and see what I can find.
Yeah.
Of course, as translators, like when we look for the next works that we're going to translate, it's easier to find something like in a Taiwanese literary award list or something like that. But I myself also like to explore something that hasn't been discovered or hasn't been talked about enough. So it's just my little treasure hunt and things I like to do when I was back in Taiwan.
Yeah, and thank you, Jenna, and yeah, thank you for your reminder. Certainly, I believe many of you miss Taiwan, and then many of your friends want to visit Taiwan, and we really have to remind everybody that the Taiwan is not only known for food, for delicious food, but also known for various independent bookstores throughout across the country. And actually, many independent bookstores are committed to diasporic people from Hong Kong. Some are from Hong Kong. Some are designed for people from Hong Kong. Some are committed to the dignity and the autonomy of Tibet, and some are for other politically depressed people everywhere in the world. So please feel free to visit Taiwan. And I before we have some minutes left, but I think that after many of us share our encounters with darkness, is it possible for over you to talk about your expected futures. How about your future plans? Do you want to? Yeah, I believe that yeah, all three of you deserve vacations. But how about your future projects? Anything, any writer, any book you are going to uh, translate, and or any new book you are going to sell? How about Wen-Chi? How about you? May you tell us? Yeah, say something about your
Well,
next project.
Well, usually I just translate poems. Poetry
Okay.
is a little bit easier for me because it's not like like even though it's a short story, it's very lengthy in
Yeah.
a way, and you always take
Mm.
like almost 1 week or even like 1 week to translate like full time. So for me, I feel like a piece of work, like poem, is a little bit easier for me. I just need to spend like 1 hour or 2 hour, and then one poem finish, and then it's quite easy, like done. You just feel like kind of a progress in a way. Obviously, you feel a progress. So usually I will always focus on poetry. I was thinking like next one maybe Luo Zhichen, maybe a very famous
Oh
Taiwanese
yeah,
poet who's quite
yeah,
famous for his kind of mysticism. Um, or
yeah.
maybe Ye Qing's work like lesbian poetry as well.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
still
yeah.
not quite sure. I need to ask for copyright first, like ask Ye Qing's family if it's okay to translate
Oh yeah,
Ye
because
Qing's work.
Ye Qing, right?
A little bit like Chen Miaojin style
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
a
I
way
think because
because she just
she,
committed suicide.
yeah, yeah,
She committed suicide in 2014 or 15.
yeah, 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 yeah,
No,
yeah,
either
yeah, yeah, yeah.
2005 or 6, sorry. So her work is relatively melancholic and all about love and also depressed, all this kind of style. So it's really cool as well for me to translate her work. And yeah, so this is my next project. In terms of academy life, I'm looking for a professorship. No, assistant professorship, sorry. Assistant professorship, not because I'm just a postdoc.
Well, good luck, good luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lin, I know that definitely you need a vacation. Maybe you need maybe a spa session, a massage session. But how about any book after Yang Shuangzi's book?
Yeah,
Any?
I will admit here that I don't read my contracts closely enough to know if I'm allowed to talk about anything that's
Okay,
in
okay.
the works
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Cautious. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so not
Don't
touching on
reveal too much.
specifics, but actually I want to just give a shout out to the Taiwanese government, to the Ministry of Culture who are sponsoring really kind of a large flux of works from Taiwan to be translated into English just for potential sale. So there's not even the guarantee of sale to a US or UK based publisher or any other language in the world, but they are kind of really throwing resources behind translators, publishers, and rights agents to just make these samples happen. So I do work with several Taiwanese-based organizations, including Da-Kuai Wenhua, to be translating these samples, including for graphic novels, children's books, and also novels, literary novels, or so-called genre, to just kind of push out more and more Taiwanese content into the market to potentially be seen. And for myself, of course, I have, writers who I really want to translate, who I've been in discussion with, but kind of like when she said, like as a translator into English, you do have to go through this rigmarole. Well, no, it's a process. It's a process. It's a long process of trying to secure rights on all sides, and you're kind of acting as the intermediary to make sure that kind of both the English language publisher and the author and their original publishers and everyone involved is in agreement for this project to even kind of begin. So there's a lot of that, but I'd say for my focus is on Taiwanese literature that maybe has kind of an internationalist slant. So either Taiwanese writers in diasporas or just kind of stories that involve kind of Taiwan's or Taiwanese people's interactions with other cultures. And that's kind of like the general lens through which, but actually now after translating this Huang Lijun story, I'm like, I'm loving the speculative. I've done a lot of historical fiction, and now I'm kind of like the futurist stuff. You don't need to consult a book. Like you can make up the system, and that's kind of really exciting as a translator. So yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, thank you. And Jenna, and how about you? I know that are you going to flying back to Taiwan, or are you going to flying away to another continent? And what's your and then can you reveal something about the future as long as you don't don't do anything bad to your contract?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going back to Taiwan. I'll be in
Oh,
America after my tour. So I'll be flying back there, and I'm working with a few different Latin American authors right now. And at the same time, I am thinking about taking a break from the Taiwanese literature scene because there's a lot of bureaucratic things that I just don't want to deal with anymore. However, there are some projects that I'm working on. There are some graphic novels I'm also working on. I think we're pretty much in the same project, probably with Lynn. And so there's that, but I do feel like I need a break from Taiwanese literature after having translated a very heavy, very, very heavy novel and
yeah,
having talked about it over 20 times. And I just feel
yeah.
like and there's a lot of labeling in terms of promoting our own book. Like once we start promoting our book, there's a sense that I feel like sometimes I'm tagged with those labels. But we're all individual translators who want to get to know a lot of different authors and translate different works that interest us. So I would like to free myself out of the labels and start to get to know other authors and get to know other new works that's coming up in a scene. Instead of, like I think this year is really for I translated before, but for me, I feel like it's time to move on, and I also really want to focus on my own creative writing process.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your honesty. I feel kind of bad because I myself I am a teacher of Taiwanese literature. So Taiwanese literature is becomes kind of a nightmarish to you. And finally, we have another question, but I will, I think that this is the last question, and maybe we have several minutes to take care of it. Okay, from Kevin Wang is curious about the title of the chapbooks of the series. It's called Ká-sióng, and he thinks that this title foregrounds the language of even cultural identity of Taiwanese Hokkien. While Kevin is very perceptive, but I have to say that this title, I think, is assigned by Jeremy Tiang from Singapore, not from any of us, not from any Taiwanese person, but from Jeremy in Singapore. So, while the term might have something to do with Taiwanese Hokkien identity, but it's from Singaporean. Okay, so how about may I ask three of you what do you think about the title, the series title, Ká-sióng, 假想?
Yeah. I wanted to say that Jeremy did come up with the title, but he discussed with all of us and saw all of our opinions, and we did discuss other possibilities. And I think in collaboration with Strangers Press, with our author or our editor there, and that we ultimately concluded like there was kind of it was a democratic process. But I think going back to kind of the idea of like what does it mean to kind of pointedly say this series title is not going to be in Mandarin Chinese, it's going to be in Hokkien. I feel like kind of like what you see just from the 3 titles that we translated here, that the authors' names are all, they look diverse, right? Like Jenna said, some authors are choosing to romanize their names, using their Taiwanese pronunciations. Wen-Chi obviously translated an indigenous author who's using their indigenous name, and Sabrina chooses to use her English name with her, right, kind of Mandarin name as like inside the cover. And so I feel like there is just that freedom, because we are a place where there's so many overlapping languages, even like cultures of romanization, like even our names among the 4 of us are like using drawing from a variety of romanization systems. And I just feel that Taiwan, because it hasn't gone through that like enforced uniformity process, is just going to be diverse in our choices of language. And I think the title of the chapbook series reflects that.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that finally, thank you, Ding. Finally, I think that I figure out a way to encourage readers to reach out to us, not directly, but indirectly. So may I thank the cultural various agencies again. I'm going to thank them because if readers are interested in any of us, the readers can find us through these agencies, including the British Center for Literary Translation, UEA Publishing Project, Strangers Press. Yes, certainly try to buy books from strangers, and the National Museum of Taiwan Literature, Taipei Representative Office in the UK, and the Taiwan Ministry of Culture. You can easily find us through them, or even you can find perhaps grants, grants for translators, grants for anyway various grants from Taiwan Ministry of Culture, and many of us here and offline are supported by the very generous Ministry of Culture in Taiwan. So please check out the websites of these agencies, and I wish you have a good time. And I hope all of you take good care and have fun. It's already November, it's almost winter. Take good care, and thank you all. I think that almost time. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you all the readers. Thank you. Bye bye.